tomorrow together.
The Nissan Sugarbelt 400 has a traditional home at Eston, a major sugar production area nestling in rolling KwaZulu-Natal hills about 30 kilometers from Pietermaritzburg. Event headquarters are at the Beaumont Eston Farmers Club, with the pits and start-finish area providing a colorful mix of transporters, high-tech machinery and hospitality tents.
Over the years, the Nissan Sugarbelt 400 has emerged as one of the toughest and most popular events on the ABSA Off-Road Championship calendar, the race round 3 of the series. ABSA Championship races attract competitors from throughout the country, and there's plenty of activity with crews going through pre-race documentation and other formalities. Technical personnel are also hard at work as they carry out last-minute adjustments before the pre-race prologue that determine start positions for the race the next day.
Veteran former South African champion Hannes Grobler is a multiple Nissan Sugarbelt 400 winner who is well aware of the pitfalls that make the race one of the toughest on the off-road calendar.
Yeah, it's not so easy. It's a very technical route through sugar canes, and then we've got part that's in forest and in mountain areas. It's not so easy. You must read the route very well. There's lots of rocky outcrops and so on, but it makes it nice. It's all about the off-road.
After a dream debut for the Ford racing team with a second place on the previous event, Thomas Rundle faced more challenges.
Yeah, it was a good event, last event. Obviously a dream result, as everyone has said it is. But yeah, new event, new car, left-hand drive, yeah, new challenge. You know, the team is exceptionally professional. The guys are really committed to what they're doing, and you know, they've done a great job. They've been under a lot of pressure to get the cars ready, and they've worked long hours, and it's really paid off. The cars are awesome.
For rookie Castrol Toyota factory driver Hein Lategang, off-road racing is a sharp learning curve.
I was talking to Serge Damso this morning, and you know, if you go on the dirt, it's just about experience. I don't think you can learn it. There's no switch, there's no quick school. So I'm taking it step by step, learning, making mistakes, and hopefully getting somewhere.
After 2 wins in the first 2 events, the Donaldson Nissan pair of Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford took to the Nissan Sugarbelt a comfortable lead at the top of the production vehicle and SP class championships. There was a close battle for second and third between Nissan and Toyota crews, and also in the top 10 were 2 teams from classes D and E.
The final act at driver's briefing is always the draw for prologue start positions, with the main players the top 5 seeded crews. With prologue start positions as important as those for the race proper, there's a serious side to the draw. But in the spirit of off-road racing, the serious stuff is always tempered by some light-hearted banter.
Apart from determining grid positions for the race proper, the pre-event prologue also gives crews an idea of the conditions they can expect during the race proper. The Nissan Sugarbelt 400 prologue saw the RFS Toyota Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst get away ahead of Hugo and Jaap de Bruyn's Micron Excel Toyota and the Donaldson Nissan Navara of Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford. 4th car away was the Castrol Toyota Hilux of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, with the pair immediately throwing down the gauntlet to other teams with a blistering performance that earned them pole position for the race.
In a stunning performance, Taylor, a former South African circuit racing champion, and the experienced Houghton blitzed the opposition to post a time more than 90 seconds faster than Hannes Grobler and Juan Moore in the Donaldson Nissan Navara.
In off-road racing, teamwork between driver and co-driver is a fundamental requisite for success.
100 meters 90 right, 100 meters 90 right.
A wrong slot was to cost Grobler and Moore valuable time on the prologue, while up ahead the RFS Toyota Hilux pair of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were putting together a workmanlike performance. They were third fastest, albeit a minute and 40 seconds behind Taylor and Houghton.
Impromptu games allow spectators to while away the time between cars, but for drivers and co-drivers, there's no such time for such interludes. Local hero Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer posted the same time as Visser and Badenhorst with the new twin-turbo diesel Ford Ranger TDCi, again showing enormous potential. Norwegian Ivar Tollefsen and his British co-driver Quinn Evans are full of confidence these days after finishing 4th on the Dakar Rally, and we're having another good run in one of 3 factory Donaldson Nissan Navaras. Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin were going along steadily in the second Castor Toyota, with Latergan having his first taste of Sugarbelt conditions. The Works Toyota was 6th fastest, and the Bloemfontein husband and wife team of George and Sharon Barkhuizen in the AIM Toyota Hilux were delighted with 7th place in the SP class.
The Harry Smith-based pair of Kobus van Tonde and Riaan Gulpa were nearly 3 minutes off the pace in the Unifreight Ford Ranger. They're still getting to grips with the ex-factory Ford Ranger. And also on a learning curve are Pretoria crew Christian de Ploy and Henk Janse van Vieren in the RFS Toyota Hilux. They've moved up from Class D and are also getting to grips with what is a purpose-built race car. Peter Ruthven and Deval Boshoff in the Ruacon Ford Ranger are another team on a learning curve, after previously campaigning in the special vehicle category, and are also running an ex-works car.
The father and son team of Hugo and Jaap de Bruin looked set for a fast time when further progress in the Micron XL Toyota Hilux came to an abrupt halt. A quick look was all that was needed to diagnose a flat tire.
There were no such problems for another father and son team. Cliff and Louis Weichelt won Class D on the first 2 events of the season, and a clean run saw them set the fastest time in class in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D.
The unfortunate Hugo and Jaap de Bruin was still busy changing the flat on the Micron XL Toyota when Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford went steaming past. All was well with the Nissan team, but that would soon change for the worse.
While a few local inhabitants were enjoying themselves, Foss and Pitchford had been stopped in their tracks by a puncture that turned into a major problem when they battled to get the wheel back on the hub. The incident was to drop them to the back of the field, behind the likes of circuit racing star Leroy Poulter and engineering boffin Rob Howie, who set the pace in Class E in the Ferodo Nissan hardbody.
A little local knowledge provided these youngsters with a grandstand view of the action, and they were obviously enjoying themselves. Other locals putting hometown knowledge to good advantage were Papi Rubeluza and Kulile Vakaliza, who set the same time as Poulter and Howie to lead the Class E brigade. Not far behind the leaders were Bloemfontein pair Lou de Bruin and Riaan Greuling in the Ruacon Racing Ford, previously campaigned by former champion Jack Peckham.
After a disappointing start to the season, with 2 successive non-finishers doing nothing to help their cause, former Blue Bulls scrum half Kutsia Labaskachny and Johan Gerber needed a good result. The pair were given a boost when they posted the 2nd fastest time in Class D in the Ray Sonics Nissan hardbody.
A steady performance took brothers Johan and Werner Horn to 3rd in Class D in the Malalan Toyota Land Cruiser. Things weren't quite as rosy for Atlas Copco Toyota pair Gary Bertolt and Andre Vermeulen, and for them the prologue had turned into a disaster.
We just came down the hill there. I think one of the tire rod ends just snapped, so the one wheel is standing in the wrong direction, but you can't drive it like that. So we'll just have to forfeit the prologue and just start tomorrow morning at the back, but then we'll start all over again. One of those things. Good. Thanks.
Back in the pits, it was time for service crews to assess any damage to their chargers and to prepare vehicles for the rigors of what was going to be a tough race. The lucky teams were those who needed only to make a little adjustments here and there. After a superb performance in the prologue that brought him his first pole position, Toyota's Anthony Taylor was understandably upbeat.
First time for me, it feels awesome, you know, and especially being the Nissan Sugarbelt 400 to have a Toyota on the front row of the grid, I think it's absolutely superb. So let's hope that we're going to have a brilliant result tomorrow.
At the other end of the scale, any positive pre-race plans entertained by championship leaders Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford now lay in complete tatters.
We didn't know it at the time, but we had brand new rims on the car, and you've got to take the slight burr off the inside of the rim off, and we hadn't done that, so we couldn't get the wheel back on, and we lost 7 or 8 minutes trying to get the wheel back on, and by that time, you know, our time trial was already damaged, so we're going to have a long day tomorrow, but obviously we must just try and make the best of it.
In only his third off-road race, circuit and kart star Leroy Poulter was also in a happy frame of mind.
We came and tested yesterday, found a couple of things that were wrong, and we sorted it out last night, and I mean, it's a different car. I can't believe it's the same one, and it was easy to drive, and it just showed the performance.
Papi Rubeluza set the same time as Poulter, but had his doubts about a race to the first corner.
First thing in the morning, it will be slippery and it will be dusty, so one has to exercise caution. I don't think, like us starting together with Leroy, I'm not sure if we can win this race on that first corner, because we're starting exactly at the same time. So you just let it be for the morning session and try and improve on your pace or on your standing as the race goes on, not in the first corner, not in the morning session when it's still slippery and dusty.
After 3 wins in 3 starts this season, the team to beat in the special vehicle category were former champions Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman in the impressive new Motorite Revo 1 4x4.
Hoping to make up for a disappointing Eastern Cape 400 was Limpopo driver Naim Mosaji.
Hopefully a much better weekend. Things just didn't go well for us there. We had a lot of small minor problems and a bit of driving error here and there, but hopefully overcome all that. We haven't been here for the Sugarbelt last year, so looking forward to it again.
2 steady outings took Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson to second in the championship, and they were looking for more of the same.
Plans is pretty much to do what we've been doing, not get too caught up in the championship, although we, in the back of my mind, is quite aware of it. But the whole idea was to get through to the desert with solid finishing, and that's what we've been doing. So same strategy. We've got new tyres, so we have to keep it a little bit more tidy this weekend.
For new kids on the Class P block, Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, it was their first Nissan Sugarbelt race.
Yeah, we have spoken to some of the other crews like Jan Kraai, and they've given us a few tips, what to do and what not to do. To stay in the race, and we're going to try and follow some of the recipe, and we'll see how it goes further on the prologue. The class is getting quite big. Competitors are getting more and more, and I think it's going to be one of the biggest classes on the national events.
Going into the Nissan Sugarbelt 400, former champions Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman held a comfortable championship lead, but only 2 points separated the next 3 crews. 3 crews from Class P and 1 Class B team also featured in the top 10 in the overall standings.
As is the case in the production vehicle category, the top 5 seeds in the special vehicle category draw for prologue start positions, with Hutchison and Bergman starting ahead of Shamir Voriyawa and Siegfried Rousseau.
With a half a dozen or more crews capable of winning overall, the battle for grid positions in the special vehicle category was going to be a fierce one. On an event like the Nissan Sugarbelt 400, a good start position is just as important as it is in a Formula 1 at Monaco. Motor racing is unpredictable at the best of times, and there was a turn-up for the books when Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzer set the fastest time in the stubby-looking Century Property Development Racing CR1 4x4.
Colin Matthews and new co-driver Mark de Chalane then gave the Century Property Development team a further boost by setting the second fastest time in a bat. In the process, the pair nearly accounted for cameraman Gordon Hiles, who was closer to the action than he would have liked. The third quickest time went to Hutchison and Bergman in the Motorite Revo 1 4x4, with a pair just over a minute behind Corbett and Balzar. Some good in-car footage gives a bird's-eye view of the action, with one of the special vehicle drawbacks, the lack of a windscreen.
Third fastest time went to the Sulwolds, former South African champion Herman and his son Vichard in the Sulwold Transport Zarco. It was their best performance of the season, with the Nissan Sugarbelt only Vichard's 3rd national race. Behind the Sulwolds, another steady performance from Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson took the Regent Racing Bat into 4th place, with only 5 seconds separating the 2 cars.
Next up were former quad racer Jimmy Zahos and Stefan Kutsia in the nicely turned out Mountain Dew Porter, which won last year's race in the hands of Gary Bertelt and Andre Vermeulen. The Mountain Dew car was followed by the first of the Class P brigade, with Jan Kraai and his son Hendrik setting the fastest time in the Keymax Bat.
Class P is ultra competitive this season, and only 29 seconds behind the Keymax car were local crew Don Thompson and Don Blakely in a Zarco. The Class B pace was set by local farmer Brett Gurney in a JRE single-seater. Driving and navigating were no problem for Gurney, and he brought the JRE home 35 seconds ahead of another local crew, Rob Spencer and Gareth Mumford, who were out in another Zarco.
Since making its debut last year, the CR1 has been plagued by reliability problems, but Corbett wasn't anticipating more of the same this time round.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just a process of elimination. We slowly ironed out all the things, and Rudy was really on the money today with the navigating, so thanks to him. And thanks to Rudy and Julian for all their hard work putting the car together. It's been a long ride for us to finally get a finish, and nice to get a finish with a win on the time trial.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions. Finance from ABSA, overcoming all obstacles.
There was a nip in the air, and it was overcast as the pit area slowly came to life on race day. As is always the case, there was an air of tension as teams made final preparations for what, for some, would turn into a long day. Drivers and co-drivers swapped pleasantries, and one driver not fazed by the tension was local farmer Brett Gurney, who led the Class B runners on the prologue. Although he lives in the area, Gurney did not see this as an advantage in the race.
Yeah, maybe in some ways, maybe a slight advantage. And the marking's always so good at Sugarbelt that, yeah, it's not really a problem. You can see exactly where you're wanting to go.
There is a camaraderie in off-road racing not often found in other branches of motorsport, and there's plenty of rivalry, but it's always good-natured.
The Nissan Sugarbelt 400 drew an entry of 90 national and regional competitors. It was an indication of the healthy state of off-road racing in South Africa, with the ABSA Championship a jewel in the Motorsport South Africa crown. A good crowd of enthusiasts braved the early morning chill to watch the start, with the pit area an impressive sight from the air. On the ground, Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were first car away, with the Castrol Toyota crew looking to make the most of being first on the road.
There was a gap of 22 seconds between Taylor and Houghton and the Century Property Development Racing CR1 4x4 in the hands of Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar. Colin Matthews and Mark Deschelaine set off with all guns blazing, and after that, there was plenty of start line activity as clerk of the course Rex Borum flagged cars away. Neil Woolridge and Kenny Scholthammer beat Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst to the first corner, but there was still an awfully long way to go.
All on their own at the front of the field, Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were determined to make the most of being first on the road. After a bit of a shaky start to the season, the Castrol Toyota crew were also looking for a morale-boosting result. The same applied to Corbett and Balzar, a former Northern Transvaal bodybuilding champion, who were desperate to put an end to the long string of non-finishers in the CR1 4x4.
Colin Matthews and Mark Deschelaine started the race as though there was no tomorrow. Deschelaine is a former Class B champion and was having his first outing alongside Matthews, who is a flyer. Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman were chasing after Matthews and Deschelaine, and there was early disappointment for the Century Property Development Racing pair. Just 8 kilometers into the race, the back was standing on the side of the road as Hutchison and Bergman roared past.
Matthews and Deschelaine cut lonely figures as they tried to hitch a lift with a camera helicopter, while Hannes Grobler and Joan Moore were also building up a head of steam in the lead Donaldson Nissan Navara.
Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were making good use of a clear road ahead of them with no dust problem. There were wet patches here and there, but for the most part of it, it was going to be hot and dusty. The route was also going to be a test for co-drivers, with the sugarcane sections akin to driving through a narrow tunnel with numerous side roads calling for precise navigation.
The Motorride Revo 1 4x4 of Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman had moved to the front of the special vehicle field and was chasing after the Toyota. The Revo One's distinctive body is based on a model racing car and in comparison to other Class A cars, runs on Mari Biscuit tyres. Whatever the design, it works, and Hutchinson and Bergman were starting to dominate the special vehicle category for the third time in a row. The dust was starting to pick up, but Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore were a solid third on the road and second in the production vehicle category. Behind them, Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst were still chasing after the turbo diesel Ford Ranger in the hands of Neil Woolridge and Kenny Shorthammer. For Woolridge, there was the added burden of high expectations from a home crowd.
With their confidence sky high after a fourth on the Dakar Rally, Norwegian Ivar Tollefsen and British co-driver Quinn Evans were also making good progress in another of the three factory Donaldson Nissan Navaras in the field. After a great prologue, Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzard lost ground, but the chunky-looking Century Property Development CR1 was still sounding great.
Also sounding good was the Zarko of Herman and Wichard Salwald, and the pair started to close in on Corbett and Balzar. Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson were a solid fourth among the specials, but their day was to go from bad to worse. By contrast, Nick Harper, who has 10 Comrades marathons under his belt, and son Ryan, had picked up a place or two in the Atlas Copco bat and were making steady progress.
The second factory Castrol Toyota Hilux of Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin was also making steady progress, but they were being hunted down by local crew Don Thompson and Don Blakey. The KZN pair were leading Class B after gearbox failure, so Jan and Hendrik Kraai failed to start. George and Sharon Barkhuizen were also going along steady enough in the AIM Toyota Hilux, and it was behind them that matters were hotting up. A gentle nudge let Johan and Etienne Besaidnout know that Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell wanted to get past.
Former champion Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were chasing after Gibson and Campbell, whose next victim was Atang Makgeggenene in an aging raceco on loan from Gary Berthold. After completing the prologue on his own, Makgeggenene had been joined in the car by Lesotho co-driver Victor Ncheke, with the pair also under attack from Christian de Plooy and Henk Janse van Vieren, who'd built up a head of steam in the RFS Toyota Hilux.
There were some tough midfield battles developing, with George and Sharon Barkhuizen being chased by veterans Nandus Alberts and Jeff Minnett, who were having a ball in the Rapsa bat. Alberts loves the Nissan Sugarbelt, and they had made up a couple of places already. Also involved in the midfield battles was the Unifreight Ford Ranger in the hands of Kobus van Tonde and Rian Guapa. The pair are enthusiastic privateers who are the backbone of off-road racing, but a small overshoot was to cost them just a little time.
By the time Van Tonde and Guelpa got going again, Atang Makgeggenene had gone past, and the Ford crew now had the de Plooy Janse van Vieren RFS Toyota Hilux on their tail.
Local farmer Brett Gurney was still out in front of the Class B field in the JRE and was perfectly at home in the sugarcane sections. The cane also held no fears for another local pair in Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith, who were sailing along in another JRE. Their pace was positively pedestrian compared to Nissan pair Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford, who started in 55th place. They were taking no prisoners and hauling in car after car after car.
Local crews were dominating Class B, with another KwaZulu-Natal team in Rob Spencer and Gareth Mumford third in class and looking comfortable in the Zarko.
Class B newcomers Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in the KEC bat have made an impressive start to their national campaign, but it picked up a little debris along the way. Van Staden and Rousseau had also moved ahead of regional competitors Rob and Margie Fletcher in the Ace-Tech Zarko and Lance de Three and Guy Graylen in a raceco.
With Tony Ball's tiny Bulwer Park Mighty Mag single-seater being chased by the SP-Class Transcore Ford Ranger, driven by Graham Leith and Mike Lawrenson, it was a case of David versus Goliath. Not far behind this little battle were Cliff and Louis Weichelt, who'd taken early control of Class D in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D.
There was a change in the Class E pecking order when the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux of rookie Pikkie Labuschagne and Rikus Erasmus caught the Rubicon Racing Ford in the hands of Louw de Bruin and Rian Greylen. With a warning screamer bearing, the Toyota Cruise sailed past the Ford, which had developed a turbo problem.
Former rally driver Tony Ball and his little mighty mag were under siege again when they were caught by the Ferodo Nissan hardbody of Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie, who were having a tremendous tussle with Bapi Rubeluza and Kulili Vakalisa in the factory Ford Ranger. In the end, the Nissan had the legs on the mighty mag, with the Ford in hot pursuit.
Another good battle had developed in Class D, where Kutsia Labuschagne and Johan Gerber in the Raysonics Nissan hardbody had locked horns with the Micra and XL Toyota Hilux of Heini Strumpfer and Hendrik van der Linde.
When crews completed the first loop of what was a figure-of-8 course, the Castrol Toyota Hilux of Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton was still in a comfortable lead in the production vehicle category. Second on the road and in control of the special vehicle category were Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman in the Motorite Revo 1 4x4. Hannes Grobler and Joan Moore were given a little encouragement from their service crew and were looking strong in the Donaldson Nissan Navara. Also looking in good shape were Neil Woolridge and Kenny Shortheimer in the turbo diesel Ford Ranger, with Woolridge on home soil.
The RFS Toyota Hilux in the hands of Chris Visser and Jappie Badenhorst was still chasing after the Ford, and in turn was starting to come under a little pressure from Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans.
Mark Corbett and Rudy Balzar were still second in the special vehicle category, but pulled into the pits for some running repairs.
While other crews waited for their charges, there was frantic activity and a little confusion in the Century Property Development Racing pit.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA, going the extra mile to get you financed.
This Sunday on football's greatest show, it's the final episode of one of the...
Finance from ABSA, going off the beaten track to find solutions.
The day was starting to warm up, and the racing was also starting to hot up, with interesting little battles developing throughout the field. Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton were still untroubled at the front of the field, but there were ominous signs for the Toyota crew. Hannes Grobler and John Moore had found a way past Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman and had taken time out of the Toyota's lead.
Hannes Grobler has been around for almost 30 years and with his vast experience is a past master at cat and mouse games. With a clear road ahead, the Donaldson Nissan pair could concentrate on taking more time off the Castrol Toyota up ahead. For their part, Hutchison and Bergman were firmly in control of the special vehicle category.
Behind the first two cars on the road, there'd been a significant change. Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans had got past both the Visser-Badenhorst Toyota and the Woolridge-Skoltheimer Ford and were now third in the production car stakes. Woolridge and Skoltheimer appeared to have picked up a problem and were coming under fire from Herman and Richard Sulwald, who'd moved ahead of the Corbett Balzar CR1. The Sulwalds were a bare bit behind Hutchinson and Bergman, but were putting up their best showing of the season.
The Regent Racing pair of Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson still had a little trauma ahead of them, but for the time being were up into third place. It had also been a good morning so far for Nick and Ryan Harper, who'd worked their way into fourth place amongst the specials in the Atlas Copco Bat.
Also on the move were Hugo and Jaap de Bruin in the Micra XL Toyota Hilux. They picked up a few places, and behind them, the Gibson Campbell Bat and the Deploy Janse van Vieren Toyota were still locked together. Overtaking was impossible on sections of the routes, and for those doing the chasing, patience was a valuable commodity. Hein Leitergan and Chris Birkin looked solid in the second Castrol Toyota Hilux, and Nardis Alberts and Jeff Minott were still having fun in the Rapsa Bat.
Former SA champion Shamir Variawa and Siegfried Rousseau were battling a brake problem on the Team Total Porter that was hampering their progress. There were no such problems for Kobus van Tonde and Rian Guapa in the Unifreight Ford Ranger, but they were being hunted down by Chris Visser and Henk Badenhorst. And then came Duncan Voss and Ralph Pitchford, who was simply scything through the field after starting 55th on the road.
There were pockets of spectators all along the route, some enjoying highly competitive racing. Reigning champion Johan Etienne Besadenhouten moved into Class P in the lead in the Adenko Bat, and behind them, Class B leader Brett Gurney had been caught by Atang Makhekenene and Victor Ncheke in the borrowed raceco. Gurney politely moved over, with Makhekenene and Ncheke putting up a good showing in an aging car.
Local KZN crews driving JRE entries were still dominating Class B, with former SA champion Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith chasing after Aston farmer Brett Gurney. Both Class B cars were being hauled in by the KEC Bat, with Johan van Staden and James Rousseau now up into second place in Class P in another impressive performance by last year's Northern Region champions.
The father and son pair of Cliff and Louis Weichelt were still firmly in control of Class D in the N1 4x4 Toyota Hilux D4D. A third successive win was looking more and more on the cards, and behind them, rookies Pikkie Labeskagni and Rikus Erasmus were starting to think in terms of a maiden national win in the Class E 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. They were being chased by Leroy Palter and Rob Howie, with the Ferodo Nissan hardbody pair still fighting off the attentions of local crew Bapi Rubeluza and Kulile Vakalisa in the factory-entered Ford Ranger.
Still running strongly, but a long way behind the Weichelts in Class D were Kutsia Labeskagni and Johan Gerber in the Raconics Nissan hardbody. The experienced Nissan pair had a slight advantage over Heini Strumpfer and Hendrik van der Linde, who are in their first season in the Micron Excel Toyota Hilux. With the track being churned up by the cars ahead, it was tough going for those towards the back of the field, but brothers Katlego and Andrew Makanete were still going strong in their Zarko.
At the compulsory pit stop, all was well with Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton.
It's been going very well, I must say. It's a bit slippery in the morning on the dew, and you know, being first on the road in the forest is quite slippery because there's a lot of leaves in the forest itself. So just taking it very easy there. Hannes caught up to me a little bit, and to about a minute and a half, and then I started pushing again a bit. Now it's up to about 2.5 minutes. So yeah, it looks like we got the pace. Let's hope we can bring it home in one piece.
Over in the Donaldson Nissan camp, there were also no problems for Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore.
Tough day on the office. It's very, very tight, very technical, but it's good. Some places it's very slippery, and it looks like the farmers enjoy it to even put the irrigation on. So we had a few slips and slides through there, but it's very well organized.
There were also no problems for special vehicle leaders Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman, although a demanding route was turning out to be a little tougher than the crews expected.
It's incredibly tough out there. It's quite different. It's some new areas of the route. This last lap now, the west loop was quite intense.
In the Ford camp, there was concern over the Ranger developing a loss of power.
Look as though you've had a tough morning.
It's been good, but we just developed a little bit of power loss at the last 100k, so there's something wrong with, I think, down bottom end, the turbos.
For Class P leaders Johan and Etienne Besadenhouten in the Adenko Bat, it had been an exciting morning.
It's nice, it's fast, it's tricky, and hair racing. So, yeah, goed gooien. Kijk waar eindig ons vanmiddag.
At Team Total, former SA champion Shamir Variawa had decided to live with a lack of brakes.
Yeah, battling with the car. Some sort of reason we don't have brakes, so we got to pump it a few times before we get some sort of brakes. So we're just driving on gears, and we opted to go drive it the whole way to the finish like that, because if we have to look for a fault now, it will take us over 20-30 minutes.
With crews forced to halt for a minimum of 15 minutes at the designated service point, there's always frantic activity as technical personnel tend to the myriad of major and minor problems that vehicles pick up out on the route.
In the Nissan pit, an animated Duncan Foss was giving team manager Glenn Hall a rundown on his morning's graft behind the wheel.
Yeah, it's been pretty tough out there. We've had to pass a hell of a lot of cars. The dust's really bad and there's just no wind out there, so we're struggling a little bit. We're not making up as many places as we'd like to.
Picky Labuskaghni and Rikus Erasmus had done a good job to take the lead in Class E, but some hard work lay ahead.
Although hard work hasn't been done yet, I think the nearest car is within 5 minutes from us, so we have to keep on working hard.
So you're going to catch Duncan Foss now?
No.
It had also been a tough morning at the office for the Makanete brothers, but they had no doubts about being amongst the finishers.
How's your morning been?
It's been very, very tight. Slipping, overshooting a few times, but we're here and we're going to finish the second lap.
A little water splash provided a problem for a spectator who did not want to get his shoes wet, and then he took a bit of a ribbing from his mates. They were well out of the way when Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton came along in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. The Toyota pair had a goodly lead over Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, but the Donaldson Nissan crew were pushing hard to try and put a little pressure on the Toyota team.
There wasn't much pressure on Motorite's Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman. The Revo 1 4x4 was again performing impeccably, and they were well in control of proceedings in the special vehicle category. Behind the Motorite pair, Ivar Tollefson and Quinn Evans were in a solid third place among the production vehicles, with the Nissan Navara sounding healthy.
Although they'd fallen well behind Hutchinson and Bergman, the father and son combination of Herman and Wichard Zolwald was still a solid second in the special vehicle category. In only his third event, teenager Wichard was gaining in confidence as a co-driver, and the Zolwalds had a comfortable lead over another father and son combination in Nick and Ryan Harper, who'd taken the Atlas Copco Bat into third place among the specials.
Off-road racing is liberally sprinkled with family teams, and another father-son combination in Hugo and Jaap de Bruin were making steady progress up the SP class pecking order. Watching the Micra and Excel Toyota Hilux go on its merry way with the out-of-action Richard Schilling and Chris Davies and their service crew. Also running strongly were local pair Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell, who are now fourth among the special vehicle competitors.
Although minus a little bodywork, Hein Lateghan and Chris Birkin looked in good shape in the second Castrol Toyota Hilux. But for race leaders Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton, it was the end of the road.
The Castrol Toyota Hilux ground to a halt, and it was a disconsolate Anthony Taylor and Robin Houghton who walked out of the forest. I'll be home for dinner, love. Sorry. Then Anders Alberts and Jeff Minute went past in a very healthy-sounding Rapsa bat.
I don't know, we had a very comfortable lead on Hannes, about 3.5 minutes. And about 1 kilometer from here, either the spigot shaft or the clutch is broken, and we've got no drive going to either the front or the rear. So yeah, that means we're out, unfortunately. You know, it was a good event for us, strong lead, and yeah, unfortunately, a mechanical failure.
While it was heartbreak time for Taylor and Houghton, championship leaders Duncan Foss and Rolf Pitchford were still charging through the field and hauled in Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst in the RFS Toyota Hilux. Behind Visser and Badenhorst, the Unifreight Ford Ranger was holding its own, with the Harry Smith-based crew doing a sterling job in one of the ex-factory Ford Rangers. Close on their heels were Class P leaders Johan and Etienne Besaidenout in the Adenko Bat.
Local driver Brent Gurney was still leading Class B in the JRE, but his progress was temporarily halted when he stopped to change a flat tyre. Racing a single-seater means one has to be driver, navigator and mechanic, and it was an incident that was to cost Gurney dearly. While he was stranded on the side of the road, Marcus Taylor and Derek Keith moved into the Class B lead in another JRE. Gurney was also passed by Class P frontrunners Johan van Staden and James Rousseau, but he was still enjoying himself.
So as a puncher, otherwise, how's it been going for you?
Oh, no, it's been going very nicely, eh?
In conditions, dusty, what?
Yeah, a little bit dusty, but no, it's great fun out there. It's getting a little bit rutted out and rough, but no, it's great.
While Neil Woolridge and Kenny Schultheimer were soldiering on at a reduced speed in the Ford Ranger, the unfortunate Gurney had lost another place, and some makeshift repairs were needed to get Mark Corbett and Rudy Balza in the Century Property Development Racing CR1 back to the pits.
So we qualified for it yesterday, obviously, but unfortunately we hit a bit of a rock or something. And it broke our steering arm, and we've had to glue it in place to get home.
Vehicle and asset finance from ABSA. Going off the beaten track to find finance from ABSA. Overcoming all obstacles.
After a chilly and overcast start, it had turned into a sweltering day in KwaZulu-Natal. And back at the pits, Nissan VIP guests were being spoilt with food and refreshments in the cool of a huge marquee. The entertainment included skydivers dropping in on proceedings, all of which was of little concern to Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, who were starting the final loop of the race at the front of what looked like developing into a Nissan benefit.
Okay, gaan het hier om, ja. 100 meter gaan we stop door die accuracy step.
Grobler and Moore had a big lead at the front of the production par field, and all they had to do to make sure of their first victory of the season was bring the Donaldson Nissan Navara home in one piece. A win for Grobler and Moore also looked to be Nissan's third success of the season, and barring mechanical failure, it looked like turning into a drive through the park.
The special vehicle leaders were in much the same boat as Grobler and Moore, and all Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman had to do to secure a hat-trick of wins was to keep their heads and avoid any heroics. For the former champions, it was turning into a season in sharp contrast to their 2008 trials and tribulations.
A Norwegian and a Yorkshireman in a South African car sounds like a league of nations, but Ivar Tollefsen and Quinn Evans were doing a sterling job. In true off-road spirit, when he got married to wife Emily 3 years ago, Evans chose the most northerly church in the world in the Arctic Circle to tie the knot. Tollefsen and Evans are in their third season in the ABSA Off-Road Championship, and a maiden win looks to be in the offing for the popular foreigners.
Herman Sulwalt won a South African championship 15 years ago, and along with San Vichart, had a tight hold on a hard-earned second place in the special vehicle stakes. They had a lead of over 3 minutes ahead of Nick and Ryan Harper, who'd come up with another of their trademark steady performances in the Atlas Copco bat.
Another solid performance had taken KwaZulu-Natal crew Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell into 4th place in the Gibson Racing Bat. And a well-deserved 5th place had veterans Nardis Alberts and Jeff Minnett smiling from ear to ear in the Rapsa Bat.
The drive of the race, though, belonged to Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford, who were now third after starting in 55th place. Perseverance had also paid off for Hein Latergan and Chris Birkin, who were a solid 4th in the SP class in the Castrol Toyota Hilux. A late replacement for Mark Ronier in the Castrol Toyota at the start of the season, it's been a sharp learning curve for Latergan, and the former circuit racing star has shown plenty of character and determination under very trying conditions.
The second Toyota at the front end of the field was the RFS Hilux of Chris Visser and Jaapie Badenhorst, who's another Comrades Marathon veteran. They were on their way to their third top 5 finish of the season, ahead of Kobus van Tonder and Rian Guelpa, who were the leading Ford team in the Unifreight Ranger.
Kobus van Tonder played Craven Week rugby and concentrated on polocross before switching to off-road racing. He also collects model cars and trucks and is one of the most enthusiastic privateers in the sport.
Chasing after the Unifreight Ford were Hugo and Jaap de Bruin. Despite a determined effort in the closing stages, the Micron Axel pair finally finished just over a minute behind Van Tonder and Guelpa. Brothers Johan and Etienne Besaidnout wrapped up their second Class B win of the season with impressive rookies Johan van Staden and James Rousseau in a solid second in the KEC bat.
After another race fraught with problems, reigning champions Cully and Quinton Silvalt salvaged valuable points and family pride by coming home 8th among the specials and 6th in Class A. For crews in the lower classes, it was turning into a long and hot day with Pikkie Labuskaghni and Rikus Erasmus starting their last lap at the front of the Class E field in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux.
Class B was still in the hands of a KwaZulu-Natal crew with Rob Spencer and Gareth Mumford taking over from Brett Gurney, who had retired. Cliff and Louis Weichelt were still in complete control of Class D and had built up a huge lead over Henny Strumpfer and Hendrik van der Linde, who were nearly an hour behind. Jaco Swanepoel and Keith Solomon were headed for a solid finish in the IDM Cement Toyota Hilux. And behind them, there was a huge scrap going on between Naeem Musaji and Mohammed Moulston, who had Don Thompson and Don Blakely climbing all over them.
After a dodgy prologue, Cape crew Derek de Toy and Ian Pienaar had done well to work their way into second place in Class B in the Orange Tree Bat. After a non-finish on the Eastern Cape 400, it meant valuable championship points for the pair, who were being chased by Class E championship leaders Dion Fenter and Ian Palmer in the 4x4 Mega World Toyota Hilux. Third in Class E were reigning champions Yanni Visser and Joks Leroux in the RFS Toyota Hilux after another tough outing for the pair.
After a horrific day, Mike Whitehouse and Matthew Carlson had dropped way down the special vehicle pecking order, and Regent Racing teammates Terence Marsh and Peter Groenewald were having an equally frustrating outing in the ex-factory Nissan Navara, which was plagued by clutch problems.
Circuit racing and kart star Leroy Poulter and Rob Howie had also had a long day in the Ferodo Nissan Hardbody and were rewarded with 4th place in Class E. Behind them, Leon and Leonie Botma had ground out a solid 3rd place in Class B and had the satisfaction of coming in ahead of championship leaders Bez and Dion Besaidnout in the Adenko Bat.
Another brave effort also saw the Makanete brothers make good on their promise to see it through to the finish.
The checkered flag was out for Hannes Grobler and Johan Moore, who hardly put a wheel wrong all day and led home a Nissan clean sweep of the first 3 places. After a non-finish on the Eastern Cape 400, it was a welcome return to form for Grobler and Moore, who is known to his close mates as One More. It had been a typically tough and exacting Nissan Sugarbelt 400, and Grobler and Moore had to work hard for their triumph.
Yeah, we've had an excellent race. We started 5th this morning, 5th overall and 2nd of the SP class. And it was very tough, it was very tight, technical, but it's a dream come true for the Nissan team, getting 1st, 2nd and 3rd. Yeah, so we couldn't wish for anything better.
For Evan Hutchinson and Achim Bergman, the fairy tale continued, with the Motorride pair putting the finishing touches to their 3rd win in a row. The success of the Motorride Revo 1 4x4 also put a dent in the old adage that new race cars are prone to teething problems. It can't get much better than 3 starts and 3 wins, with the Revo 1 showing both impressive pace and reliability.
We are very happy. We never expected it. We thought that this car would be reliable. That was one thing that we were counting on, but we didn't know that we'd have the pace like this. So, it's been a long, hard day. It wasn't an easy win, The guys were right behind us and we're feeling quite tired and a little bit sick, so quite happy that it's all over.
A demanding route had also contributed to a tough day at the office for Dakar Rally hero Ivar Tollefson.
This is hard. Today, 6 hours driving here today. It's one of the hardest stages or races I think I've ever done. It was extremely busy.
A place on the special vehicle podium was a good result for Nick and Ryan Harper in the Atlas Copco Bat. And KwaZulu-Natal crew Clint Gibson and Gary Campbell worked hard for their 4th place in the Gibson Racing Bat. The drive of the day belonged to Duncan Foss and Ralph Pitchford, and Toyota driver Hein Lateghan was sick and tired of dust.
Yeah, I mean, it's very tough. It's tough on the body and you need to be very fit. This last 50 Ks, I could feel it, I mean, it takes feels like an hour before it's finished. I mean, we're reasonably pleased, but it's difficult. I mean, I drove in dust for 400 km, and you really can't push, you know, and it makes it quite difficult.
A weary Kobus van Tonder was chuffed with his finish.
It was very technical. We had a few close calls, but we managed to escape from that. So we are very glad to be here.
For Class P winner Johan Besaidenout, it was an event that had everything.
It's rough, it's wet, it's dry, there's trees, it's mountains. I just love it.
There was also happiness from the Weichholts.
I think with the torque and with this terrain, I think the diesel did well. We just had a problem with the front diff coming home now, the last two loops. So we couldn't push really hard, otherwise it went very well.
A triumph for the Nissans on their own event, with the Donaldson Nissan Navaras taking the first 3 places. There were also top-class performances from Class E winners Pikkie Labuschagne and Rikus Erasmus, and Class D winners Cliff and Louis Weichelt, who both picked up top 10 finishes.
On the special vehicle front, it was 3 for 3 for motorite pair Evan Hutchison and Achim Bergman, who've taken a tight hold on the championship. Sterling efforts also saw 3 Class P cars and 1 Class B entry make it into the top 10.
The final act of the day was random scrutineering checks with technical consultant Dick Sorensen checking the legality of the cars.
What I've got in my hand here is a gauge to measure the size of the induction air restrictor on each of the vehicles. Now in each class the restrictor is a different size, and this one is a 32, which applies to the SP vehicles. Okay? And measuring the size of the inlet air restrictor is a means of levelling performance to a degree.
The points as it stands after the first 3 meetings, and Duncan Foss has taken a 19-point lead into the Toyota 1000 Desert Race. He's looking good at the top, but Tollefson will be chasing hard. And in the specials, Evan Hutchinson is enjoying a 35-point lead over Nick Harper, and Michael Whitehouse and Johan Besaidenout certainly will have their work cut out for them as they head to Botswana.
Next up for the ABSA Off-Road Championship Brigade is the Toyota Kalahari Botswana 1000 Desert Race from June 19 to the 21st. It's the only marathon event on the calendar and a highlight of the year, with huge and enthusiastic crowds turning out to watch all the action.
And we'll be talking to you from there.
That was the ultimate test, the ABSA Off-Road Championship. Now fast track your